All right. Hello, everybody. It's not Halloween today, but what kind of Packers are playing tonight? I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, so we're a little bit more festive today than, well, my shirt's always festive, but a little different vibe today. Supporting my kids by wearing a Texans hat, so we're going to have a little fun today. All right. As much fun as today has been, we're going to be talking about a very serious topic, depression. It is National Depression Awareness. And so, this is, well, as far back as I can remember, whether it be a loved one or friend, there's always somebody in our community that, has, at the very minimum, a brief moment in their life where, they struggle with this, right? May not be chronic, may not be long term, but we all have bouts of this, right? And some more than others, but throughout this pandemic, it has tripled. And so, this is scary. These numbers are scary. We both see a lot of kids, and these kids are struggling. And, depression has a, strong correlation sometimes with suicidal thoughts and the actual act of suicide. And so, this is something that's always in the back of my mind, and something that I'm always trying to make sure that I'm trying to pick up on cues about this. So let's jump in on this. Overall, I wouldn't say that in my office I've seen a massive spike in depression with some of my kids, but I've definitely seen those who struggle come in struggling quite a bit more. And so, what are you seeing? Are you seeing kind of the same thing, Heather? Or what's going on? What's happening in your clinics?
I have sat down with more families who have had kids with suicide attempts than ever before. So we always have kids who struggle with emotional dysregulation and things like that. Not all of our kids, but I mean, that is a very consistent theme. But it's gone next level. I think it's just very important to know how things can compound on each other. And just like we talk all the time about getting to the root cause, there's no place that's more important than when it comes to mood regulation, because you can have primary depression, which often it's very heritable. If there have been studies like if an identical twin has depression, there's a 70% chance that the sibling who's the twin will have it also. There's a 40% greater chance when you look at immediate family members. You have to know, is it biochemical? Is it genetic? Is it environmental? There are personality things that can put you at a higher risk. But then there's also secondary depression, which, for example, a child's been misunderstood because they're struggling with sensory processing or big picture, flexibility, brain connectivity, ADHD, dyslexia, whatever. And they've been called lazy, difficult. They've had all these negative personality traits attached to them for so long that they can have secondary depression. Or is it depression? It can be that they are just demoralized, which is, it's very hard to tease those apart. You have to know what is primary, what is secondary. Are we calling it something that it isn't? And also, I think it's very important for us to talk about the difference between sadness/grief versus depression, because those are not the same thing.
A lot to tackle there. I would say, just clinically, what I've encountered the most would just be, and part of the reason I love the hidden churn, or what you call your page and everything, is because these kids are churning, right? And I had a kiddo come in at the end of last year, at the start of this year, and just churning. And he talked. I wouldn't say he was literally clinically depressed, but he talked in a manner that mimicked it, right? Where he talked about taking his own life. He made these threats because his world was just in constant churn. He struggled, and so you do see this with these kids. They don't feel like they can ever get out of this hole or whatever they feel like they're in. They're just trapped, right? Like in a cell, and they can never get out. And so they're just churning. And that's why I love what we do, right? Because, we're trying to help them out of that hole, help them out of that cell. But you got to know what you're doing, at least, from a neurological standpoint, and looking at them. And so it's so important to start looking at, some of the soft signs and stuff like that. So I just, out of curiosity, obviously I don't think you have numbers in front of you or anything crazy like this, but do you have do you, in your clinic, do you notice more of kind of a genetic component to it, or more of the secondary where it's just more of the churning aspect?
I mean, there's some of both, but I would say it's more secondary,
Mm,
because they're getting in trouble. They might be suspended or expelled or have all these negative, this is the problem child or whatever. Um, it's very important to know about, is it rejection sensitivity? There's, like with depression, a sense of shame and worthlessness. One of the ways you can tell the difference
mm,
between grief and depression is self-esteem impacted? Because with grief, self-esteem is not going to be impacted. With primary or secondary depression, it often is. There can be a sense of hopelessness. That can just be because I have tried and tried and tried for so many years in school and I'm still falling short. So I feel hopeless. I don't have
mm,
cognitive flexibility to find workarounds. So it's not necessarily depression. It's important to know, one thing that we got to talk about is there's what used to be called dysmia. It's now called persistent depressive disorder. That is like a sort of, there's not the right words I want to put to this. It's sort of like a low grade depression that does
mm,
not meet the major clinical depression criteria, but it can have a bigger impact on people than major depressive disorder. Major depressive disorder, when people will seek treatment, they don't feel shamed by it, is 80 to 90% of people have vast improvement or complete improvement from symptoms by doing the right things. Whereas when it's this low grade, I don't have energy. I'm listless. I feel worthless. I not really pursuing my goals. I'm gaining or losing weight. I'm sleeping too much. I'm sleeping too little. When it's not, doesn't have neon lights on it, a lot of times these are thought to be, these people are cold or they're complainers, a lot of times like that, and
mm,
they start believing that and think this is my personality. It's not anything that needs
mm.
to be treated. It's not thought of as depression. And so they might have more shame, whereas if I have a very clear label for this
Over,
and it's
yeah.
very treatable. So yeah, it's our kids, most of the time it's secondary to other things, or I would say probably, but it's a mix. Every situation has so many multi factors going on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things that I hear from my kids when they open up is just the feeling that they can never do anything correctly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Academics or social, or the combination of all this stuff. They just kind of feel beaten down, chronically beaten down. And so, you know, it's a, I'll be honest, the things that we can do as practitioners is just our touch and our tone, and you can see kids start lighting up. And so I love that opportunity to talk to them and let them know that they, that just, whatever I need to say in that moment. But you feel it from like just the emotion that they're just like, I can't get out of this rut, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And so this is such a great topic to talk about. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the symptoms. Okay. And, kind of and you mentioned kind of one of the more common ones I see is just the difficulty to concentrate, right? Just the, yes, blah, but I got kids, they can get out of bed, but just they cannot engage mentally into any project. And so one of the most common things I see is retraction, right? They pull back or cannot concentrate on a project or anything going on in their life, really. And so a lot of people think that is overtly obvious, but a lot of times this can be hidden. They can look lazy or
Apathetic. Yeah.
apathetic, right? But it's not really what's going on there. And so, this is one of the big ones. I started when I notice a kid who I know can concentrate, who I know has this ability. There's nothing I know impeding it. I start, my ears start peaking up because I'm thinking this could be an issue, right? And I want to pay attention.
Yeah. Individuals must have a sense of self before they can have self-worth.
Mm,
So if their brain is not communicating properly, they don't have that body brain connection, body awareness, there are so many things that get in the way of, I don't know who I am. So therefore, I don't know what stirs my soul. I don't know how to get engaged in this. So,
mm,
we've got issues in the brain that can cause attention issues, or I have trouble attending. So then I feel bad about myself, or I don't get why this matters in the big scheme of things. So it is
mm,
just when we talk regularly about logging things, there is just not a more important time to do this. And even adults listening, to log thoughts and emotions and behaviors and moods and all of that, you really just, those are all just go together, and things happen within milliseconds. And so one of the best things to do is to look at thought patterns. Some kids have fixed thought patterns. They might have obsessive tendencies because of neurodevelopment. But then I develop, we got to not shame the thought. We have to know that we need to teach our kids intentionally, and we need to know this ourselves, that thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are transient data that are also affected by our assumptions, even unconscious bias. That teacher doesn't like me, so then everything she says, I kind of twist it around to where it fits that preconceived notion. It may or may not be true, but then I make assumptions, and then what you look for, you will find. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Do they make, are they all or nothing thinkers? Are they mind readers? They think they know it, thinking it's really off. And then that impacts how they respond and how they feel about themselves. So it's very important to teach kids. We can't just assume they figure this out. Thoughts are not facts. We don't shame ourselves for the thought. We want to write down and look for patterns of those, and then we want to honor the thought, the feeling, not judge it. Doesn't mean we act on all of it. We got to work on impulse control and things like that. And then we can act on values. And then we can see where, and it even helps if you put down what was happening before I felt this way, during, after, what I do about it. You can start seeing, oh, every time it has something to do with authority. Or, wow, the reason I got so upset at this is I felt really competitive because I have perfectionistic tendencies. Why is that? Because I don't feel worthy unless I prove my worth. You can really start getting patterns going to figure it out.
I love that. One thing I want to go back a step, because I found high consistency with this. And I just even had an adult patient come in a few moments ago, and who has very poor body awareness. And knowing this was our topic, right? And I was like, do you struggle with anxiety and depression? And yes, she does, and a history of it, right? And so, but going back to developmentally and body awareness and interoception, the ability to perceive self and how I fit within the world and how I need to act within the world, and all of this stuff is so intimately tied to worthiness, right? Like, and there's very good research coming out about interoception, the ability to perceive self, how you feel about yourself, how you feel in particular scenarios, and just overall awareness. And so I kind of want to go back to that, because I think that's such an important part, because so many of our kiddos, their body awareness, their ability to perceive even just appropriate scents, right? I got kids that I touch them like this, and they literally say, "Ow, you're hurting me." And although it's an alteration of perceived sense, right? Like, there's not enough pressure there. I'm not squeezing on them, but their brains are saying ow, 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 because their perception of self and their environment is so skewed, right? And so, do you see that as well? Do you see this lack of proprioception, this poor interoception, as a strong connection with, I'm going to generically just kind of categorize it, but like mental health issues, anxiety, depression, all of that stuff?
100%. I mean, I would say the vast majority of people we see have issues with body awareness. This is just to back it up a little bit for anyone who doesn't know what this is. It's information we get through our muscles, joints, tendons, connective tissues. These sensations, if you've ever just taken a deep breath out of the blue and you're like, why did I do that? Was I holding my breath? It is like a yellow warning sign that we might be about to escalate before the emotion arrives. So some kids will be heightened to that. And if they get a knot in their stomach, it's supposed to be a warning flag. And that is what leads to the anxiety. Others, those signals go over their head. So the light in their brain just goes green, red, and they're missing the yellow. And then they are reactive and go into a fight or flight mode. Yep. So yes, when you think about child development, the very first stage of getting in touch with ourselves is I am my body. That's what little ones think. You see them experiment with their fingers and toes. They recognize themselves in a picture, mirror, etc. And then when that keeps going, I start realizing I'm way more than my body. I am my heart, my soul, my core, my interests, my purpose, my connectedness to other people. There are so many facets of what make us who we are. If I don't have that, I am going to tend to have shame and feel worthless and have rejection sensitivity, and then have very skewed assumptions that then become self-fulfilling prophecies, because then I behave in a way that might cause people to act differently toward me. It's just this vicious cycle. A lot will misperceive. If you are communicating them with anything other than overt happiness and approval, they will think that person doesn't like me. They're rejecting me. I'm not good enough. Opting out then happens, and then they're called lazy. Or perfectionism. I have to earn your approval because I'm a human doing who is judged solely based on what I do, not on who I am. Rage, suicidal ideation, all of these are tied. So that is why it is so important to look at this very holistically and consider all the factors. And even if you find one yes of something not going right, you don't stop looking. You have to know the combination of things that are leading to the struggles.
Yes. Yes to all of that. I love that. Yes. I mean, there's so much to unpack here. Yes. Okay. I loved everything you said. Just for time, I want to step into the next thing. Just so everything Heather said, absorb all that because it was beautiful. And you have to, like Heather and I always talk about this. A lot of this stuff has foundational, all of it has some sort of foundational neurology to it, right? Like developmental. So this is why we're always going back and forth to this. But Heather and I don't see symptoms. I know we both do that. We see a person, a whole person, and we try to peel away the layers of that person and understand them that they are not one thing, one action, one thought. And unfortunately, a lot of times I do hear that that kiddos are pegged into something, a diagnosis or an action or mistake in what they did, right? And so, but these these kids and these whoever we're seeing are not they're not the one action, the one thought, the one diagnosis. They are individuals. So we're all about peeling away and finding the true person in there, right? And so I love that about what we do. But one of the things that as we're talking is coming to mind is autonomic nervous system, because sleep plays a role in this, but also when we were talking about chemistry and all of this too, right? That's intimately tied to gut health and autonomics as well. And so my kiddos, one of the things I look at in kiddos is their pupil size, and I'm getting lots of kids with extremes in the pupils, right? Either pinpoint pupils or just blown out pupils. And so I'm seeing this, and I'll be honest with you, it has gotten worse throughout the year. It has gotten way worse for my kiddos. And so they're coming in just stressed to the max. They may come with smiles on their face, but their physiology is stress. And so I am seeing a lot of them. But sleep, right? And we know how important sleep is for mental health, okay? It plays such a massive role. If you're a parent and you don't get sleep, you know the impact on your mental health, because you're just so moody, and you start eating stuff that you're like craving sugars, all this stuff, but it plays a role, right? And then that plays a role into everything else. And so autonomic nervous system, are we looking at the autonomic nervous system and how that plays a role? Any thoughts on that, Heather? And clinically, what you see?
Oh, yes. I mean, our sensory world, our emotions impact our nervous system. And then, and so one thing I want to say is a lot of kids are thought to be trying to avoid things because they'll complain of a headache or a stomach ache. But our bodies and our brains are connected, and one of the signs of depression is chronic pain. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I want to make that just really clear, because it impacts your immune and your autoimmune functions, how inflamed your body is. And then you will have aches and pains. We have these signals for a reason as these warning signs. So yes, kids who have the startle reflex, kids who are anxious, reactive, impulsive, those responses in our nervous system are going to be impacted. Just to connect another dot here, if you have kids who sometimes have bedwetting accidents or even accidents at school, that is part of your internal sensory system, which directly is attached to this, what we're talking about, the fight or flight in the nervous system and the sympathetic response. So if they don't know when they're hungry, when they're full, there are just so many things. They don't care about eating. We don't want people to live to eat, but they're also, it's kind of a sign if there's no enjoyment in that process. These are things that we are more subtle. Some of them are obvious things y'all might think about, but these are things that would be more subtle. So I wanted to mention things that might not be just so intuitive with that.
I like that. Yeah. That was really good. we don't live to eat, but we should enjoy eating, right? There's pleasure, a neurochemical pleasure, dopamine, all that other stuff that's involved with it. So, when I always ask about diets and what are we eating, but is our appetite good? Is it, on par with our activity and what we're doing? And that's a great question to kind of enter that. And you will see kids who are, I wouldn't say ferocious eaters, but eat, well, and they'll start pulling back, pulling back, and pulling back. And parents are kind of like wondering why, but it's one of the symptoms that may be there. And you might start thinking maybe you're thinking whatever you may be thinking, but sometimes, bulimia or something else can be kind of the initial thought, but you have to think again, this is a whole person, right? So sometimes, like Heather talks about, looking at and journaling for consistency, because that's so big in understanding, what's going on. And I'll be honest with you, one of the most important things for me is timing. When did this occur, right? Has this been going on for a while, or did something traumatic happen a few days or weeks ago where we all started precipitating? And you'd be surprised, like there's like like a switch in parents' heads. Sometimes they're like, I didn't even try these things again. They're great, amazing parents, but they're not tying sometimes some of the stress that's happening in these kids' lives to some of these smaller symptoms, or because a lot of times when kids maybe are not eating as much, parents aren't tying this to inherent, like, this is depression. They might think there's something else going on. So, but I love that Heather always highlights journaling, because there's magic in that, because we can't keep top of mind all the things that happen in a day, let alone a few days, let alone a week or a month. And so, so important to do that.
Not to mention, doing a brain dump clears out your mental sketch pad. You don't have to worry about losing it. And now it's free to handle other things, and I'm less overwhelmed. But to Brian's point, and one of the things I wanted to share, one of the big ways to distinguish depression from sadness or grief is that depression is most of the time for at least 2 weeks. Now, if we're talking about the persistent depression, it's a longer period of time we're looking at. But with grief or sadness, it comes in waves. And you, let's say you lose a relationship, or someone dies, or you lose a job, something like that. You're going to have fond memories. There are going to be things you laugh about, and then there might be times you're in tears. That is sadness. Whereas depression, no matter what you do, the mood stays low. I mean, that's a big differentiator. And you can't tie it to anything. When we're thinking about neurodevelopment, think about my child's, or if the adult, you're thinking about yourself, are my responses because of a precipitating event, something that happened, and it's just that they're out of kilter with what someone who is not struggling neurodevelopmentally would have. So in other words, I got in trouble at school. That's going to upset most people on some level. Do my children just have a bigger response to that, but anybody would have one? That is usually neurodevelopment. If what they did is just out of left field and you can't even figure out what on earth is going on, then that might be more of a mood disorder type of thing. So I don't love the word disorder, but that's what it's called. So are there precipitating events, and it's just a matter of degree and them not knowing what to do with it? That is usually neurodevelopment. There's also disruptive mood disorder that needs to be present for a year in at least 2 settings, where it's usually in response to frustration and big outbursts, and often even aggressive, not in keeping with their character. This is, like we always say, not indicative of character, but they might even be aggressive with people, pets, property. And that needs to occur before the age of 10 to be that diagnosis. So that's something that can look like something else too. I'm just trying to give a few little tidbits here. And if you lose someone, there may be times you have thoughts of, it's like a pleasant thought almost to think about if you died too and getting to join them. There's a difference between that and suicidal ideation and really thinking about or planning taking your own life. So I don't want to lower the antenna on things, but I also want to get perspective on it.
100%.
Kind of different.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah. A lot of clinical gems in there. A lot of there's a lot of confusion around that. So I love that you brought that up. Just as somebody who did struggle with depression for a long time, not saying obviously that I've beaten the diagnosis or anything, and I don't have any clinical diagnosis. This is self-diagnosis, okay? But there's a how do I put this? Because I don't want to imply that this or implicate that this applies to everybody, but there is some bit of kind of a sense of weakness. Okay, like kind of almost. I'll my own words. I was disgusted in myself because I felt mentally weak. I know that's not the case. Okay, now looking back, but back then I did. Okay, there was circumstances outside of my control that I had no control over, but I thought that I was mentally weak or not tough enough because it was traumatic to me. And so I withdrew from communicating or expressing the pain I was in. And so, you know, you have to be, as somebody who went through that, I just want to say that, no one's going to open up probably right away. We're not going to just peel open, this is my wounds, but you have to let that person know you're there. Okay. And I have a wonderful mother, and she was always there for me. And that I attribute to, making it through it. But a lot of people don't feel like there's anybody there for them. If they don't, that I think is probably one of the main contributors to self-harm. And so, you have to just be there. Sometimes you just don't have to say anything, right? It's just the idea of you being present or available that can be very impactful. So there you go.
I have to say one other thing is that, and I've said this before in a different context, but there is nothing wrong with you if you have multiple opposing emotions at the same time. Okay, I have to say that. My aunt, whom I was very, very close to, died late last night. She was a huge source of support for me, like another mother figure to me. And I'm sad. I am grateful. COVID hit her, and she was miserable, and it was time, and she was ready at that point. So I can feel grateful for that, and it does not make any of us selfish that we're sad about it. A lot of times people are like, and if you are trying to support someone you care about, it's good to have perspective, but let that person come to their own perspective instead of telling them how lucky they are that, well, she's in a better place. There's nothing wrong with saying that, and whatever's well-intentioned, that's great. But I'm talking about what will probably serve most people the best is, like Brian said, that you are here, you care. What can I do for you? You can even say, I don't know what to say, but I do love you. You're on my heart. And by the way, most people want to talk. Most people try to avoid talking about, I don't want to bring that up because it's going to make the person sad. Just like people think that I'm not going to ask this person if they thought about suicide because that's going to make them do it. Not true. And most people who lose someone want to talk about that person. And you might be that smile in that roller coaster of emotions that we're talking about. So I can have gratitude and at the same time honor emotions. So I want to say that for anybody out there feeling that, but also if you're trying to minister to someone who's going through a hard time right now.
Beautiful. I think that's the way we should end this. They cannot end any better than that. What Heather said is 100%. So this was kind of a sadder conversation, but that's okay. This needs to be discussed. People need to know this. Parents need to know this. We all need to know this stuff. So that's okay. The important part, and I want to say this, I'll say it on behalf of us. Heather, please add any words, but whether or not I have a direct interaction with you or you're somewhere else in the state and I've never met you before, I just want you to know that if you reached out to me, I would respond. Okay. So we do this for you all. This is part of our ministry to our communities, right? And so I just want you to know, if you message us or commented or anything like that, I know that both of us would be happy to help you, whatever that may be. I'm always happy to find something or someone or for somebody else, because that's my goal. That's my responsibility in this world. So Heather, if you want to add anything, please do. Otherwise, we'll proceed and finish it up.
I can't really add to that. I know both of us are happy to help anyone who wants to reach out. and everybody matters. I mean, you make a difference in this world, and we need to make sure that people in our lives know that daily,
100%.
not just when we see a struggle.
100%. Okay. All right. Well, Heather, people want to know where you're at. I always get, where is Heather? How can I find her? All right. So where can people find Heather?
At the Hidden Churn on Instagram or Facebook, or Brain Balance of the Woodlands, Katy, Mansfield, or South Lake.
All right. So make sure you go follow those pages. She always has great content. You also have another podcast, but you moved it to Tuesdays at 11.
Good memory, man.
Whew.
Yes.
All right. Tuesdays at 11. So great content there. Please go follow those pages. This week, do you have something going on this week?
Yes, it is. It's Ask Us Anything, and we've already gotten a lot of questions. We've got a lot of questions about emotions, ADHD, etc. And so tune in live, type in questions, and I'll answer them live.
Wow. And I want to be honest with y'all. We started this all with Ask Us questions. It can be a little intimidating, but Heather just rattles the answers off. So she's always a sharpshooter when it comes to answering this stuff. But I've always felt a little bit of pressure, like, what if I don't know something? But Heather always has an answer or a resource. So an incredible source of information and knowledge. So make sure you go follow those pages. Make sure you jump on that podcast on the regular Tuesdays at 11 o'clock on those pages. And then if you need to get a hold of me, 972-387-4700, you can call or text me. Happy to respond either way. All right. We will be back. Let's see. We start November. All right. So we start November next week. I'm excited. As an FYI, Heather and I will not be on Thanksgiving Day. Just going to throw that out there already. So, but for the next 2 weeks, we will be on. So we'll be back next Thursday, same time, same channels. If this resonates with you or could help somebody else, please share. And again, as an extension, if I can be of any service to you, please reach out. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.